This is the series where, as many of you already know, where graduate students come in and give interesting talks about the cool environmentally related research that they're doing. So the theme for this quarter has been Hot Now, which is looking at the current impacts of climate change on both the Earth and the people that inhabit it. So one quick announcement for those of you that are taking the class is that next week we are going to have our capstone speaker. So we will not have our discussion. The discussion will be the subsequent week. We have Sila Kilakote coming in. So throughout the quarter we have graduate students come in, and this will be our one non-graduate student speaker. This is somebody from industry to kind of round out and give you a different perspective on climate change and kind of the types of solutions people are working towards. That being said, excited today to welcome Dilshanie, a PhD student in the Department of Anthropology. So please welcome.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. And big thanks to the organizers, Jonathan and Brian, for inviting me and putting this together. So I'm in the Department of Anthropology here at Stanford, and I have conducted my fieldwork research in Bangladesh, primarily with meteorologists, so government meteorologists, and with coastal farming families in the Southwest. So this talk will sort of be mostly about the Southwest and thinking about the landscape and the histories of Bangladesh, but my research focuses on environmental governance, questions of risk, and how the weather is encoded within all of that. So of course climate change is a big way in which Bangladesh is framed right now. But one of the things that really drew me to this research was thinking about the way that climate risk is encoded in Bangladesh, but then also its longer history of dealing with catastrophic weather over seasons, over generations, over hundreds of years, right? So how do we kind of parse that out? And so these are some of the things that I'd like to kind of think about in the talk. But first of all, let's see here. Oh, I'm pointing over there. So I just wanted to situate Bangladesh. First of all, here we go. Thank you. It's obviously in South Asia. It's kind of a small country that's almost embraced entirely by India. And we can see on this larger map, right, just the number of rivers that run through the country, right? It's very much a delta. It sits at the mouth of the Bay of Bengal. And there's so many transboundary rivers that are coming in. So rivers that you've heard of, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, that then in Bangladesh become the Jamuna and Meghna and Podda, and kind of striate and form this network of rivers. So it's a very low-lying space. The rivers are tidal as you get sort of closer to the coast, which means during high tide they swell up, during low tide they kind of flush out. And it's a space where life is really kind of organized by this environment and the topography and the geology, but it's not totally environmentally deterministic either, right? So what people have done in this space, how they've, how they're kind of dealing with a situation where there's a ton of water that comes through each year from the Himalayan plateau, from the Tibetan plateau, through this delta into the Bay of Bengal. It's very silty water, as you can see from this satellite image. And then this green space is the Sundarbans. Maybe you've heard about the Sundarbans mangrove forest. It's the largest mangrove forest in the world. And it kind of forms these islands. It's almost, as you get to the coast, it's almost an archipelago. And Bangladesh is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. And so, you'll be in rural space and it'll be quite packed with people, right? Which then kind of sets up the concerns of climate change, right? As the globe warms, weather, and particularly the catastrophic weather that Bangladesh has seen over such a long period of time, becomes more erratic. It becomes more difficult to plan for what is typically like a very agrarian kind of way of living, right? Rice farming and vegetable farming are huge in the country. It's very fertile because of all of this silt, because of all of this water, but then also dangers encoded into that set of constraints. So Right, so one of the things that I want us to also be thinking about are how have the histories of this place, right, come to produce its social and political realities, and then what are the forms of dispossession that are kind of renewed time and time again from social relationships, from political affiliations, from these very kind of social aspects of living in this space. So when we see a picture like this, right, it seems to be one thing, right, like a landscape, men are working, and this is a picture from one of the villages that I was doing fieldwork in the Southwest. But what is it? What are the kinds of histories that have undergirded this space and brought it into being in the first place? So this is something that we'll be kind of going through in this talk, right? This just kind of gives you like the opposite view from the satellite image, right, which is a very bird's eye view here. We're sort of on the ground looking out. And we'll return to this image a little bit later in the talk, but this is actually a situation where the river that was on this side has eroded a retaining wall or embankment and then kind of come into the space of the village, and so people are trying to deal with this kind of changeable landscape, these like very seasonal erosions that happen. They're trying to figure out how to live and maintain their lives and livelihoods. So, all right. So here we'll just. So one of the things that I just kind of wanted to highlight, right, in thinking about climate change, the way that it's instantiated in the day-to-day and like across years is through kind of serialized natural disasters. And Bangladesh is a place that has seen so many seasonal kind of occurrences of disaster, whether it's flooding from the monsoon rains, whether it's the cyclone, the cyclones that happen yearly over 2 seasons. And so there's this excess of water and a very changeable, immutable landscape. But are these simply natural, right? Of course there are these weather phenomena that are creating certain effects in a place. But I kind of want us to think about natural disasters in the way there's a geographer named Jesse Ribot. He has I think that's a very helpful formulation. When we think about disaster, we have to think about a pre-existing hazard, like a cyclone or like flooding, but how that intersects with the vulnerabilities that are on the ground, right? So the kind of social and political relationships that form life, right? And so then that kind of complicates the picture of what might be seen as very natural, or it forces us to kind of think about nature and society together, right? Instead of breaking those apart into 2 separate domains. So, right. So climate change is obviously kind of goes hand in hand with Bangladesh at the present moment because of a lot of its geographical and topographical features, but the fact that it's very low lying, the fact that it's deltaic, makes it uniquely vulnerable in the present day to even small amounts of sea level rise, similar to the small island nations. So one of the conversations that's going on in Bangladesh right now is that of climate reparations. So spokespeople for climate change in Bangladesh, who are Bangladeshis, working with the government, will go to fora like the IPCC, like COP, and make a case. They've partnered with a lot of the small island nations and are saying, look, we're not the countries that have caused a lot of the pollution. We haven't unleashed fossil fuels into the atmosphere historically, but we're some of the people who will be disproportionately affected by climate change in the future. So this is a kind of ongoing conversation. But then, of course, with something like climate reparations, how that money gets paid out, who pays, and then who will benefit from that, comes back to these questions of how life looks lived on the ground, and what who can access those kinds of resources as well. So let's see. Yeah. So so one of the features of anthropology, as some of you know, is that the kind of main method that we use as anthropologists is that of ethnography, which means that we're situated in the place. You're really spending a lot of time there, and you're doing interviews, of course, with a variety of people, depending on your questions, but you're also trying to kind of do what's called participant observation. So you're spending time in a place, and you're seeing what people do, like how they interact with one another, how they interact with the landscape, the kinds of decisions that they're making. And this is very telling as well, because you kind of come to understand. Sometimes people will say one thing, but they'll actually do another, and then why is that? You're trying to kind of piece that together. So this is very illustrative in terms of just how you try to make a life in these kinds of agrarian spaces, given these yearly and seasonal concerns. But one of the places that anthropology is very strong in kind of elucidating and analyzing is kind of understanding the day-to-day, right? So how do people make a living in everyday life? So this has like almost a different temporality than that of climate, right? Which is a very kind of saturating, long-term way of understanding change over time, right? And specifically sort of weather and environmental change over time. And so one of the interesting challenges that Bangladesh poses is bringing those temporalities together, right? So through anthropology, this is one of my arguments, right? Through anthropology, we'll be able to kind of understand this very large object of climate, which is almost difficult to get a handle on kind of experientially through understanding changes in weather and environment. So this is something that maybe we can, I'll just go quickly through this, but it's something that we can get into in the Q&A, because going back to this earlier point about understanding the different histories that undergird a place, and this is something that I would like all of you to think about when you're doing your own research as well, right? How is it that like the specific place that I am in has come into being, right? How is it structured? What are the kinds of relationships that really make its conditions of possibility? So, we see even in 1864, this is from a British colonial document published in Calcutta. Even in 1864, there were government administrators trying to figure out details about a cyclone that's hit Bengal and trying to make sense of it. And so another part of my research was with meteorologists in the Bangladesh Meteorological Department. And they use a variety of forecasting methodologies, from all of the models to kind of bringing all of the synoptic data into focus on this very analog-looking map. But this was a very exciting day at the BMD. It's the 25th of October, 2016. And a cyclone had formed in the Bay of Bengal, right? So this is the dot in the center, and you can recognize sort of the coast of India and Myanmar and Bangladesh at the top. And in this kind of temporality, right? The meteorologists have to figure out what is the track forecast, where is this going to make landfall. And luckily with this storm, in about 10 days, it sort of downcycled and dissipated, but at the time this was of great concern, and there have been just all of these serial cyclones, and we can talk more about this in the Q&A as well, but before Bangladesh was even a country, when it was East Pakistan, there was just a major cyclone in 1970 that hit the coast that's then thought of as part of the reason there was a movement for independence the following year in 1971, when Bangladesh became a country. So there's this kind of close connection between the weather and also politics and the meaning of the weather. And this is just a fun sort of graphic that the meteorologists had put together just to kind of educate the population about what to do in the event of a cyclone. And so there have been these kinds of techniques of preparation that have gone on for a really long time, almost forged by this moment in 1970 where just the severity of things really hit home. So okay, so going back to the village, this is a space where it's a very agrarian space. It's primarily rice farming, so it's a seasonal kind of practice, and you can see like the different rows here, and this eventually becomes, after 3 or 4 months, which are kind of like the fabled golden stalks of rice in Bengal, and really like a source of pride for people, but also very much a source of sustenance and livelihood, right? So people who are engaged in these farming practices really do rely on the weather for having a good harvest, but then also being able to translate that harvest into money by selling part of it, and then food for one's family, and then also being able to pay off debts that one accrues, right? So this is a different kind of weather temporality, and a different kind of way of thinking about this landscape, right? That there is a particular season and work and the environment are intertwined. This is my friend Alim Hai, and he's doing the work of kind of cutting down these rice stalks and then bundling them very carefully. And then you can see the government building in the back. That's the Union Council for this area. And then eventually the bundles get threshed, and then you have the rice with the husk on it. So not the rice that you would buy at the store. There's like one more process that has to happen, but this is how it's sold. So we can talk more about all of that. But the reason that I'm kind of getting into this is because there's also the concern. There's like kind of a slower potential disaster that could happen if there are heavy rains just at the period of the harvest, right? That could cause these bushels to go bad, and then all of this work, all of this investment of time, of labor, of money can just be wasted. So, okay. There are basically 2 examples that I wanted to give about thinking weather, but then also histories of this space together. And they kind of like problematize what we might think of as both natural disasters, but also some of the things we might have heard in terms of climate change in Bangladesh. So these